Hip-hop. Hip-hop is a culture and art movement that was created by African Americans, Latino Americans, and Caribbean Americans in the Bronx, New York City. The origin of the name is often disputed. It is also argued as to whether hip-hop started in the South or West Bronx. While the term hip-hop is often used to refer exclusively to hip-hop music, including rap, hip-hop is characterized by four key elements: rapping, also called MCing, a rhythmic vocal rhyming style, orality; DJing and turntablism, which is the practice of making music with record players and DJ mixers, oral sound and music creation; b-boying, b-girling, breakdancing, movement or dance, and graffiti. Other elements are hip-hop culture and historical knowledge of the movement, intellectual and philosophical, beatboxing, a percussive vocal style, street entrepreneurship, hip-hop language, and hip-hop fashion and style, among others. The fifth element, although debated, is commonly considered either street knowledge, hip-hop fashion, or beatboxing. The Bronx hip-hop scene emerged in the mid-1970s from neighborhood block parties thrown by the Black Spades, an African-American group that has been described as being a gang, a club, and a music group. Brother-sister duo DJ Kool Herc and Cindy Campbell additionally hosted DJ parties in the Bronx and are credited for the rise in the genre. Hip-hop culture has spread to both urban and suburban communities throughout the United States and, subsequently, the world. These elements were adapted and developed considerably, particularly as the art form spread to new continents and merged with local styles in the 1990s and subsequent decades. Even as the movement continues to expand globally and explore myriad styles and art forms, including hip-hop theater and hip-hop film, the four foundational elements provide coherence and a strong foundation for hip-hop culture. Hip-hop is simultaneously a new and old phenomenon. The importance of sampling tracks, beats, and bass lines from old records to the art form means that much of the culture has revolved around the idea of updating classic recordings, attitudes, and experiences for modern audiences. Sampling older culture and reusing it in a new context or a new format is called flipping in hip-hop culture. Hip-hop music follows in the footsteps of earlier African-American rooted and Latino musical genres such as blues, jazz, ragtime, funk, salsa, and disco to become one of the most practiced genres worldwide. In the 2000s, with the rise of new media platforms such as online music streaming services, fans discovered and downloaded or streamed hip-hop music through social networking sites, beginning with Black Planet and MySpace, as well as from websites like YouTube, WorldStar Hip Hop, SoundCloud, and Spotify. Etymology. Keith Cowboy Wiggins, a member of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, has been credited with coining the term in 1978 while teasing a friend who had just joined the U.S. Army by scat-singing the made-up words hip-hop, hip-hop in a way that mimicked the rhythmic cadence of marching soldiers. Cowboy later worked the hip-hop cadence into his stage performance. The group frequently performed with disco artists who would refer to this new type of music by calling them hip-hoppers. The name was originally meant as a sign of disrespect, but soon came to identify this new music and culture. The song Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang, released in 1979, begins with the phrase, "I said a hip, hop, the hippie the hip to the hip hip hop, and you don't stop." The 1980 hit Rapture by Blondie contains a rapping part with the line, "And you hip hop and you don't stop, just blast off, sure shot." Lovebang Starsky, a Bronx DJ who put out a single called The Positive Life in 1981, and DJ Hollywood then began using the term when referring to this new disco rap music. Bill Alder, an independent consultant, once said, "There was hardly ever a moment when rap music was underground. One of the first so-called rap records was a monster hit, Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang on Sugar Hill Records." Hip-hop pioneer and South Bronx community leader Afrika Bambaataa also credits Lovebug Starsky as the first to use the term hip-hop as it relates to the culture. Bambaataa, former leader of the Black Spades, also did much to further popularize the term. The first use of the term in print, referring specifically to the culture and its elements, was in a January 1982 interview of Afrika Bambaataa by Michael Holman in the East Village Eye. The term gained further currency in September of that year in The Village Voice, in a profile of Bambaataa written by Stephen Hager, who also published the first comprehensive history of the culture with St. Martin's Press. History: 1970s. In the 1970s, an underground urban movement known as hip-hop began to form in the Bronx, New York City. It focused on emceeing over house parties and neighborhood block party events held outdoors. Hip-hop music has been a powerful medium for protesting the impact of legal institutions on minorities, particularly police and prisons. Historically, hip-hop arose out of the ruins of a post-industrial and ravaged South Bronx as a form of expression of urban Black and Latino youth, whom the public and political discourse had written off as marginalized communities. Jamaican-born DJ Clive "Cool Herc" Campbell pioneered the use of DJing percussion breaks in hip-hop music. Beginning at Herc's home in a high-rise apartment at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue, the movement later spread across the entire borough. On August 11, 1973, DJ Cool Herc was the DJ at his sister's back-to-school party. He extended the beat of a record by using two record players, isolating the percussion breaks by using a mixer to switch between the two records. Cool Herc's sister, Cindy Campbell, produced and funded the back-to-school party that became the birth of hip-hop. According to local sources, at a Sedgwick Avenue party on August 11, 1973, Herc introduced an original turntablist style known as breakbeat that later became an essential element of modern hip-hop. According to Peter Shapiro, while Herc's innovation laid the foundations for hip-hop, it was another DJ, Grand Wizard Theodore, who created its signature flourish in 1977 or 1978, scratching. A second key musical element in hip-hop music is emceeing or rapping. Emceeing is the rhythmic spoken delivery of rhymes and wordplay, delivered at first without accompaniment and later done over a beat. This spoken style was influenced by the African-American style of capping, a performance where men tried to outdo each other in originality of their language and tried to gain the favor of the listeners. The basic elements of hip-hop, boasting raps, rival posses or groups, uptown throwdowns, and political and social commentary were all long present in African-American music. emceeing and rapping performers moved back and forth between the predominance of toasting songs packed with a mix of boasting, slackness, and sexual innuendo, and a more topical, political, socially conscious style. The role of the MC originally was as a master of ceremonies for a DJ dance event. The MC would introduce the DJ and try to pump up the audience. The MC spoke between the DJ's songs, urging everyone to get up and dance. MCs would also tell jokes and use their energetic language and enthusiasm to rev up the crowd. Eventually, this introducing role developed into longer sessions of spoken, rhythmic wordplay, and rhyming, which became rapping. By 1979, hip-hop music had become a mainstream genre. It spread across the world in the 1990s with controversial gangsta rap. Herc also developed upon breakbeat DJing, where the breaks of funk songs, the part most suited to dance, usually percussion-based, were isolated and repeated for the purpose of all-night dance parties. This form of music playback, using hard funk and rock, formed the basis of hip-hop music. Campbell's announcements and exhortations to dancers would lead to the syncopated, rhymed spoken accompaniment now known as rapping. He dubbed his dancers break boys and break girls, or simply b-boys and b-girls. According to Herc, breaking was also street slang for getting excited and acting energetically. DJs such as Grand Wizard Theodore, Grandmaster Flash, and Jazzy J refined and developed the use of breakbeats, including cutting and scratching. The approach used by Herc was soon widely copied, and by the late 1970s, DJs were releasing 12-inch records where they would rap to the beat. Influential tunes included Fatback Band's King Tim III, Personality Jock, the Sugar Hill Gang's Rapper's Delight, and Curtis Blow's Christmas Rappin', all released in 1979. Herc and other DJs would connect their equipment to power lines and perform at venues such as public basketball courts and at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue, Bronx, New York, now officially a historic building. The equipment consisted of numerous speakers, turntables, and one or more microphones. By using this technique, DJs could create a variety of music, but according to Rap Attack by David Toop, at its worst, the technique could turn the night into one endless and inevitably boring song. KC, the Prince of Soul, a rapper-lyricist with Pete DJ Jones, is often credited with being the first rap lyricist to call himself an MC. Street gangs were prevalent in the poverty of the South Bronx, and much of the graffiti, rapping, and b-boying at these parties were all artistic variations on the competition and one-upmanship of street gangs. Sensing that gang members' often violent urges could be turned into creative ones, Afrika Bambaataa founded the Zulu Nation, a loose confederation of street dance crews, graffiti artists, and rap musicians. By the late 1970s, the culture had gained media attention, with Billboard magazine printing an article titled "B Beats Bombarding Bronx," commenting on the local phenomenon and mentioning influential figures such as Kool Herc. The New York City blackout of 1977 saw widespread looting, arson, and other citywide disorders, especially in the Bronx, where a number of looters stole DJ equipment from electronics stores. As a result, the hip-hop genre, barely known outside of the Bronx at the time, grew at an outstanding rate from 1977 onward. DJ Kool Herc's house parties gained popularity and later moved to outdoor venues in order to accommodate more people. Hosted in parks, these outdoor parties became a means of expression and an outlet for teenagers, where instead of getting into trouble on the streets, teens now had a place to expend their pent-up energy. Tony Tone, a member of the Cold Crush Brothers, stated that hip-hop saved a lot of lives. For inner-city youth, participating in hip-hop culture became a way of dealing with the hardships of life as minorities within America, and an outlet to deal with the risk of violence and the rise of gang culture. MC Kid Lucky mentions that people used to breakdance against each other instead of fighting. Inspired by DJ Kool Herc, Afrika Bambaataa created a street organization called Universal Zulu Nation, centered around hip-hop as a means to draw teenagers out of gang life, drugs, and violence. The lyrical content of many early rap groups focused on social issues, most notably in the seminal track The Message, 1982, by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, which discussed the realities of life in the housing projects. Young black Americans coming out of the civil rights movement have used hip-hop culture in the 1980s and 1990s to show the limitations of the movement. Hip-hop gave young African Americans a voice to let their issues be heard. Like rock and roll, hip-hop is vigorously opposed by conservatives because it romanticizes violence, law-breaking, and gangs. It also gave people a chance for financial gain by reducing the rest of the world to consumers of its social concerns. In late 1979, Debbie Harry of Blondie took Nile Rodgers of Chic to such an event, as the main backing track used was the break from Chic's Good Times. The new style influenced Harry, and Blondie's later hit single from 1981, Rapture, became the first major single containing hip-hop elements by a white group or artist to hit #1 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. The song itself is usually considered new wave and fuses heavy pop music elements, but there is an extended rap by Harry near the end. 1980s. In 1980, Kurtis Blow released his self-titled debut album featuring the single The Breaks, which became the first certified gold rap song. In 1982, Afrika Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force released the electro-funk track Planet Rock. Instead of simply rapping over disco beats, Bambaataa and producer Arthur Baker created an electronic sound using the Roland TR-808 drum machine and sampling from Kraftwerk. Planet Rock is widely regarded as a turning point. Fusing electro with hip-hop, it was like a light being switched on, resulting in a new genre. The track also helped popularize the 808, which became a cornerstone of hip-hop music. Wired and Slate both described the machine as hip-hop's equivalent to the Fender Stratocaster, which had dramatically influenced the development of rock music. Released in 1986, Licensed to Ill by the Beastie Boys became the first rap LP to top the Billboard album chart. Beastie Boys were also one of the first white hip-hop artists and a highly influential band in the history of hip-hop, ranked as number 12 most influential band by Spin magazine. Other groundbreaking records released in 1982 include The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, Nunk by Warp 9, Hip Hop Bebop Don't Stop by Man Parrish, Magic Wand by Houdini, and Buffalo Gals by Malcolm McLaren. In 1983, Hashim created the influential electro-funk tune Al Nafish, The Soul, while Warp 9's Light Years Away, 1983, a cornerstone of early 80s beatbox Afrofuturism, introduced socially conscious themes from a sci-fi perspective, paying homage to music pioneer Sun Ra. Encompassing graffiti art, emceeing or rapping, DJing, and b-boying, hip-hop became the dominant cultural movement of the minority-populated urban communities in the 1980s. The 1980s also saw many artists make social statements through hip-hop. In 1982, Mel Mel and Duke Booty recorded The Message, officially credited to Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, a song that foreshadowed the socially conscious statements of Run DMC's It's Like That and Public Enemy's Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos. During the 1980s, hip-hop also embraced the creation of rhythm by using the human body via the vocal percussion technique of beatboxing. Pioneers such as Dougie Fresh, Biz Markie, and Buffy from the Fat Boys made beats, rhythm, and musical sounds using their mouth, lips, tongue, voice, and other body parts. Human beatbox artists would also sing or imitate turntablism scratching or other instrument sounds. The appearance of music videos changed entertainment. They often glorified urban neighborhoods. The music video for Planet Rock showcased the subculture of hip-hop musicians, graffiti artists, and b-boys and b-girls. Many hip-hop related films were released between 1982 and 1985. Among them, Wild Style, Beat Street, Crush Groove, Breakin', and the documentary Style Wars. These films expanded the appeal of hip-hop beyond the boundaries of New York. By 1984, youth worldwide were embracing the hip-hop culture. The hip-hop artwork and slang of U.S. urban communities quickly found its way to Europe as the culture's global appeal took root. This was especially notable in the United Kingdom, where British hip-hop grew its own voice and style from the 1980s, with rappers such as She Rockers, MC Duke, and Derek B., followed by Silver Bullet, Moni Love, Caveman, and London Posse. Women artists have also been at the forefront of the hip-hop movement since its inception in the Bronx. Nevertheless, as gangster rap became the dominant force in hip-hop music, there were many songs with misogynistic or anti-women lyrics, and many music videos depicted women in a sexualized fashion. The negation of female voice and perspective is an issue that has come to define mainstream hip-hop music. The recording industry is less willing to back female artists than their male counterparts, and when it does back them, often it places emphasis on their sexuality over their musical substance and artistic abilities. Since the turn of the century, female hip-hop artists have struggled to get mainstream attention, with only a few, such as older artists like the female duo Salt and Peppa, to more contemporary ones like Lil' Kim and Nicki Minaj, reaching platinum status. 1990s. With the commercial success of gangster rap in the early 1990s, the emphasis in lyrics shifted to drugs, violence, and misogyny. Early proponents of gangster rap included groups and artists such as Ice-T, who recorded what some consider to be the first gangster rap single, 6 in the Mornin', and NWA, whose second album, Ends for Life, became the first gangster rap album to enter the charts at number 1. Gangster rap also played an important part in hip-hop becoming a mainstream commodity. Considering albums such as NWA's Straight Outta Compton, Eazy-E's Easy Does It, and Ice Cube's America's Most Wanted were selling in such high numbers meant that black teens were no longer hip-hop's sole buying audience. As a result, gangster rap became a platform for artists who chose to use their music to spread political and social messages to parts of the country that were previously unaware of the conditions of ghettos. While hip-hop music now appeals to a broader demographic, media critics argue that socially and politically conscious hip-hop has been largely disregarded by mainstream America. Global innovations. According to the U.S. Department of State, hip-hop is now the center of a mega music and fashion industry around the world that crosses social barriers and cuts across racial lines. National Geographic recognizes hip-hop as the world's favorite youth culture, in which just about every country on the planet seems to have developed its own rap scene. Through its international travels, hip-hop is now considered a global musical epidemic. According to The Village Voice, hip-hop is custom-made to combat the enemy that preys on adolescents wherever nobody knows their name. Hip-hop sounds and styles differ from region to region, but there are also instances of fusion genres. Hip-hop culture has grown from the avoided genre to a genre that is followed by millions of fans worldwide. This was made possible by the adaptation of music in different locations and the influence on style of behavior and dress. Not all countries have embraced hip hop, where, as can be expected in countries with strong local culture, the interloping wild style of hip hop is not always welcomed. This is somewhat the case in Jamaica, the homeland of the culture's father, DJ Kool Herc. However, despite hip hop music produced on the island lacking widespread local and international recognition, artists such as Five Steez have defied the odds by impressing online hip hop tastemakers and even reggae critics. Hartwig Venz argues that hip hop can also be viewed as a global learning experience. Author Jeff Chang argues that the essence of hip hop is the cipher, born in the Bronx, where competition and community feed each other. He also adds, thousands of organizers from Cape Town to Paris use hip hop in their communities to address environmental justice, policing and prisons, media justice, and education. While hip hop music has been criticized as a music that creates a divide between Western music and music from the rest of the world, a musical cross pollination has taken place, which strengthens the power of hip hop to include different communities. Hip hop's messages allow the underprivileged and the mistreated to be heard. These cultural translations cross borders. While the music may be from a foreign country, the message is something that many people can relate to, something not foreign at all. Even when hip hop is transplanted to other countries, it often retains its vital progressive agenda that challenges the status quo. In Gothenburg, Sweden, non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, incorporate graffiti and dance to engage disaffected immigrant and working-class youths. Hip-hop has played a small but distinct role as the musical face of revolution in the Arab Spring, one example being an anonymous Libyan musician, Ibn Thabit, whose anti-government songs fueled the rebellion. Commercialization. In the early to mid-1980s, there wasn't an established hip-hop music industry as exists in the 2020s, with record labels, record producers, managers and artists and repertoire staff. Politicians and business people maligned and ignored the hip-hop movement. Most hip-hop artists performed in their local communities and recorded in underground scenes. However, in the late 1980s, music industry executives realized that they could capitalize on the success of gangsta rap. They made a formula that created a titillating buffet of hypermasculinity and glorified violence. This type of rap was marketed to the new fan base, white males. They ignored the depictions of a harsh reality to focus on the sex and violence involved. In an article for The Village Voice, Greg Tate argues that the commercialization of hip-hop is a negative and pervasive phenomenon, writing that what we call hip-hop is now inseparable from what we call the hip-hop industry, in which the nouveau riche and the super-rich employers get richer. Ironically, this commercialization coincides with a decline in rap sales and pressure from critics of the genre. Even other musicians, like Nas and KRS-One, have claimed hip-hop is dead in that it has changed so much over the years to cater to the consumer that it has lost the essence for which it was originally created. However, in his book In Search of Africa, Manthia Diawara states that hip-hop is really a voice of people who are marginalized in modern society. He argues that the worldwide spread of hip-hop as a market revolution is actually a global expression of poor people's desire for the good life, and that this struggle aligns with the nationalist struggle for citizenship and belonging, but also reveals the need to go beyond such struggles and celebrate the redemption of the black individual through tradition. The problem may not be that female rappers do not have the same opportunities and recognition as their male counterparts. It may be that the music industry that is so defined by gender biases. Industry executives seem to bet on the idea that men won't want to listen to female rappers, so they are given fewer opportunities. As the hip-hop genre has changed since the 1980s, the African-American cultural tradition that Diawara describes has little place in hip-hop's mainstream artists' music. The push toward materialism and market success by contemporary rappers such as Rick Ross, Lil Wayne, and Jay-Z has irked older hip-hop fans and artists. They see the genre losing its community-based feel that focused more on black empowerment than wealth. The commercialization of the genre stripped it of its earlier political nature, and the politics and marketing plans of major record labels have forced rappers to craft their music and images to appeal to white, affluent, and suburban audiences. After realizing her friends were making music but not getting television exposure other than what was seen on Video Music Box, Darlene Lewis, a model and lyricist, along with Daryl Washington and Dean Carroll, brought hip hop music to the first exposure cable show on Paragon Cable, and then created the On Broadway television show. There, rappers had opportunities to be interviewed and have their music videos played. This predated MTV or Video Soul on BET. The commercialization has made hip hop less edgy and authentic, but it also has enabled hip hop artists to become successful. As top rappers grow wealthier and start more outside business ventures, this can indicate a stronger sense of black aspiration. As rappers such as Jay-Z and Kanye West establish themselves as artists and entrepreneurs, more young black people have hopes of achieving their goals. The lens through which one views the genre's commercialization can make it seem positive or negative. White and Latino pop rappers such as Macklemore, Iggy Azalea, Machine Gun Kelly, Eminem, Miley Cyrus, G-Eazy, Pitbull, Lil Pump, and Post Malone have often been criticized for commercializing hip-hop and cultural appropriation. Miley Cyrus and Katy Perry, although not rappers, have been accused of cultural appropriation and commercializing hip-hop. Katy Perry, a white woman, was criticized for her hip-hop song Dark Horse. Taylor Swift was also accused of cultural appropriation. Culture: DJing and turntablism, MCing or rapping, breakdancing, graffiti art, and beatboxing are the creative outlets that collectively make up hip-hop culture and its revolutionary aesthetic. Like the blues, these arts were developed by African American communities to enable people to make a statement, whether political or emotional, and participate in community activities. These practices spread globally around the 1980s as fans could make it their own and express themselves in new and creative ways in music, dance, and other arts. DJing. DJing and turntablism are the techniques of manipulating sounds and creating music and beats using two or more phonograph turntables or other sound sources, such as tapes, CDs, or digital audio files, and a DJ mixer that is plugged into a PA system. One of the first few hip-hop DJs was Cool DJ Herc, who created hip-hop in the 1970s through the isolation and extending of breaks, the parts of albums that focused solely on the percussive beat. In addition to developing Herc's techniques, DJ Grandmaster Flowers, Grandmaster Flash, Grand Wizard Theodore, and Grandmaster Kaz made further innovations with the introduction of scratching, which has become one of the key sounds associated with hip-hop music. Traditionally, a DJ will use two turntables simultaneously and mix between the two. These are connected to a DJ mixer, an amplifier, speakers, and various electronic music equipment, such as a microphone and effects units. The DJ mixes the two albums currently in rotation and/or does scratching by moving one of the record platters while manipulating the crossfader on the mixer. The result of mixing two records is a unique sound created by the seemingly combined sound of two separate songs into one song. Although there is considerable overlap between the two roles, a DJ is not the same as a record producer of a music track. The development of DJing was also influenced by new turntablism techniques, such as beat matching, a process facilitated by the introduction of new turntable technologies such as the Technics SL1200 MK2, first sold in 1978, which had a precise variable pitch control and a direct drive motor. DJs were often avid record collectors who would hunt through used record stores for obscure soul records and vintage funk recordings. DJs helped to introduce rare sounds and new artists to club audiences. In the early years of hip-hop, the DJs were the stars, as they created new music and beats with their record players. While DJing and turntablism continued to be used in hip-hop music in the 2010s, the star role has increasingly been taken by MCs since the late 1970s, due to innovative, creative MCs such as Curtis Blow and Mel Mel of Grandmaster Flash's crew, the Furious Five, who developed strong rapping skills. However, a number of DJs have gained stardom nonetheless in recent years. Famous DJs include Grandmaster Flash, Afrika Bambaataa, Mr. Magic, DJ Jazzy Jeff, DJ Charlie Chase, DJ Disco Wiz, DJ Scratch from EPMD, DJ Premier from Gangstar, DJ Scott LaRock from Boogie Down Productions, DJ Pete Rock of Pete Rock and CL Smooth, DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill, Jam Master J from Run DMC, Eric B., DJ Screw from the Screwed Up Click, and the inventor of the chopped and screwed style of mixing music. Funkmaster Flex, Tony Touch, DJ Clue, Mixmaster Mike, Touch Chill Out, DJ Red Alert, and DJ Qbert. The underground movement of turntablism has also emerged to focus on the skills of the DJ. In the 2010s, there are turntablism competitions where turntablists demonstrate advanced beat juggling and scratching skills. MCing. Rapping, also known as MCing, spitting bars, or just rhyming, refers to spoken or chanted rhyming lyrics with a strong rhythmic accompaniment. Rapping typically features complex wordplay, rapid delivery, and a range of street slang, some of which is unique to the hip-hop subculture. While rapping is often done over beats, either done by a DJ or a beatboxer, it can also be done without accompaniment. It can be broken down into different components, such as content, flow, or rhythm and rhyme, and delivery. Rapping is distinct from spoken word poetry in that it is performed in time to the beat of the music. The use of the word rap to describe quick and slangy speech or witty repartee long predates the musical form. MCing is a form of expression that is embedded within ancient African and indigenous culture and oral tradition, as throughout history, verbal acrobatics or jousting involving rhymes were common within the Afro-American and Latino American community. Graffiti. Graffiti is the most controversial of hip-hop's elements, as a number of the most notable graffiti pioneers say that they do not consider graffiti to be an element of hip-hop, including Lady Pink, Scene, Blade, Fargo, Charlie Rock, Fuzz One, and Coco 144. Lady Pink says, "I don't think graffiti is hip-hop. Frankly, I grew up with disco music. There's a long background of graffiti as an entity unto itself." And Fargo says, "There is no correlation between hip-hop and graffiti. One has nothing to do with the other." Hip-hop pioneer Grandmaster Flash has also questioned the connection between hip-hop and graffiti, saying, "You know what bugs me? They put hip-hop with graffiti. How do they intertwine?" In America in the late 1960s, before hip-hop, graffiti was used as a form of expression by political activists. In addition, gangs such as the Savage Skulls, La Familia Michoacana, and Savage Nomads used graffiti to mark territory. Julio 204 was a Puerto Rican graffiti writer, one of the first graffiti writers in New York City. He was a member of the Savage Skulls gang and started writing his nickname in his neighborhood as early as 1968. In 1971, the New York Times published an article, Tacky 183 Spawns Pen Pals, about another graffiti writer, Tacky 183. According to the article, Julio had been writing for a couple of years when Tacky began tagging his own name all around the city. Tacky also states in the article that Julio was busted and stopped. Writers following in the wake of Tacky and Tracy 168 would add their street number to their nickname, bomb or cover a train with their work, and let the subway take it, and their fame, if it was impressive or simply pervasive enough, all city. Julio 204 never rose to Tacky's fame because Julio kept his tags localized to his own neighborhood. One of the most common forms of graffiti is tagging, or the act of stylizing your unique name or logo. Tagging began in Philadelphia and New York City and has expanded worldwide. Spray painting public property or the property of others without their consent can be considered vandalism, and the tagger may be subject to arrest and prosecution for the criminal act. Whether legal or not, the hip-hop culture considers tagging buildings, trains, bridges, and other structures as visual art, and considers the tags as part of a complex symbol system with its own social codes and subculture rules. Such art is in some cases now subject to federal protection in the U.S., making its erasure illegal. Bubble lettering held sway initially among writers from the Bronx, though the elaborate Brooklyn-style Tracy 168 dubbed Wild Style would come to define the art. The early trendsetters were joined in the 1970s by artists like Dondi, Futura 2000, Days, Blade, Lee Quinones, Fab Five Freddy, Zephyr, Rammel-Z, Crash, Kel, NOC 167, and Lady Pink. The relationship between graffiti and hip-hop culture arises both from early graffiti artists engaging in other aspects of hip-hop culture. Graffiti is understood as a visual expression of rap music, just as breaking is viewed as a physical expression. The 1983 film Wild Style is widely regarded as the first hip-hop motion picture, which featured prominent figures within the New York graffiti scene during that period. The book Subway Art and the documentary Style Wars were also among the first ways the mainstream public were introduced to hip-hop graffiti. Graffiti remains part of hip-hop, while crossing into the mainstream art world with exhibits in galleries throughout the world. Breakdancing. Breaking, also called b-boying, b-girling, or breakdancing, is a dynamic rhythmic style of dance which developed as one of the major elements of hip-hop culture. Like many aspects of hip-hop culture, breakdance borrows heavily from many cultures, including 1930s-era street dancing, Brazilian and Asian martial arts, Russian folk dance, and the dance moves of James Brown, Michael Jackson, and California funk. Breaking took form in the South Bronx in the 1970s alongside the other elements of hip-hop. Breakdancing is typically done with the accompaniment of hip-hop music playing on a boombox or PA system. Breakdancing includes 4 dance styles: rocking, b-boying or b-girling, locking, and popping, all of which trace their origins to the early 1970s. According to the 2002 documentary film The Freshest Kids, A History of the B-Boy, DJ Kool Herc describes the B in B-Boy as short for breaking, which at the time was slang for going off, also one of the original names for the dance. However, early on, the dance was known as the boing, the sound a spring makes. Dancers at DJ Kool Herc's parties saved their best dance moves for the percussion break section of the song, getting in front of the audience to dance in a distinctive, frenetic style. The B in B-Boy or B-Girl also stands simply for break, as in break boy or girl. Before the 1990s, B-Girls' presence was limited by their gender minority status, navigating sexual politics of a masculine-dominated scene and a lack of representation or encouragement for women to participate in the form. The few B-Girls who participated despite facing gender discrimination carved out a space for women as leaders within the breaking community, and the number of B-Girls participating has increased. Breaking was documented in Style Wars and was later given more focus in fictional films such as Wild Style and Beat Street. Early acts made up of mainly Latino Americans include the Rocksteady Crew and New York City Breakers. Beatboxing. Beatboxing is the technique of vocal percussion, in which a singer imitates drums and other percussion instruments with his or her voice. It is primarily concerned with the art of creating beats or rhythms using the human mouth. The term beatboxing is derived from the mimicry of the first generation of drum machines, then known as beatboxes. It was first popularized by Doug E. Fresh. As it is a way of creating hip-hop music, it can be categorized under the production element of hip-hop, though it does sometimes include a type of rapping intersected with the human-created beat. It is generally considered to be part of the same pillar of hip-hop as DJing. In other words, providing a musical backdrop or foundation for MCs to rap over. Beatboxers can create their beats just naturally, but many of the beatboxing effects are enhanced by using a microphone plugged into a PA system. This helps the beatboxer to make their beatboxing loud enough to be heard alongside a rapper, MC, turntablist, and other hip-hop artists. Beatboxing was popular in the 1980s, with prominent artists like the Darren Buffy the Human Beatbox Robinson of the Fat Boys and Biz Markie displaying their skills within the media. It declined in popularity along with b-boying in the late 1980s, but has undergone a resurgence since the late 1990s, marked by the release of Make the Music 2000 by Rozelle of The Roots. Beatmaking, producing. Although it is not described as one of the 4 core elements that make up hip-hop, music producing is another important element. In music, record producers play a similar role in sound recording that film directors play in making a movie. The record producer recruits and selects artists, rappers, MCs, DJs, beatboxers, and so on, plans the vision for the recording session, coaches the performers on their songs, chooses audio engineers, sets out a budget for hiring the artists and technical experts, and oversees the entire project. The exact roles of a producer depend on each individual, but some producers work with DJs and drum machine programmers to create beats, coach the DJs in the selection of sampled bass lines, riffs and catchphrases, give advice to rappers, vocalists, MCs, and other young artists, give suggestions to performers on how to improve their flow and develop a unique personal style. Some producers work closely with the audio engineer to provide ideas on mixing, effects units, for example auto-tuned vocal effects such as those popularized by T-Pain, miking of artists, and so on. The producer may independently develop the concept or vision for a project or album, or develop the vision in collaboration with the artists and performers. In hip hop, since the beginning of MCing, there have been producers who work in the studio, behind the scenes, to create the beats for MCs to rap over. Producers may find a beat they like on an old funk, soul, or disco record. They then isolate the beat and turn it into a loop. Alternatively, producers may create a beat with a drum machine or by hiring a drum kit percussionist to play acoustic drums. The producer could even mix and layer different methods, such as combining a sampled disco drum break with a drum machine track and some live, newly recorded percussion parts or a live electric bass player. A beat created by a hip-hop producer may include other parts besides a drum beat, such as a sampled bass line from a funk or disco song, dialogue from a spoken word record or movie, or rhythmic scratching and punches done by a turntablist or DJ. An early beat maker was producer Curtis Blow, who won Producer of the Year credits in 1983, 1984, and 1985. Known for the creation of sample and sample loops, Blow is considered the Quincy Jones of early hip-hop, a reference to the prolific African-American record producer, conductor, arranger, composer, musician, and bandleader. One of the most influential beatmakers was Jay Dilla, a producer from Detroit who chopped samples by specific beats and would combine them together to create his unique sound. Those who create these beats are known as either beatmakers or producers. However, producers are known to have more input and direction on the overall creation of a song or project, while a beatmaker just provides or creates the beat. As Dr. Dre has said before, once you finish the beat, you have to produce the record. The process of making beats includes sampling, chopping, looping, sequencing beats, recording, mixing, and mastering. Most beats in hip-hop are sampled from a pre-existing record. This means that a producer will take a portion or a sample of a song and reuse it as an instrumental section, beat, or portion of their song. Some examples of this are the Isley Brothers' Footsteps in the Dark, Parts 1 and 2, being sampled to make Ice Cube's Today Was a Good Day. Another example is Otis Redding's Try a Little Tenderness, being sampled to create the song Otis, released in 2011 by Kanye West and Jay-Z. Chopping is dissecting the song that you are sampling so that you chop out the part or parts of the song, be that the bass line, rhythm guitar part, drum break, or other music you want to use in the beat. Looping is known as melodic or percussive sequence that repeats itself over a period of time. So basically, a producer will make an even number of bars a beat, for example, 4 bars or 8 bars, repeat itself or a loop of a full song length. This loop provides an accompaniment for an MC to rap over. The tools needed to make beats in the late 1970s were funk, soul, and other music genre records, record turntables, DJ mixers, audio consoles, and relatively inexpensive Portastudio-style multi-track recording devices. In the 1980s and 1990s, beat makers and producers used the new electronic and digital instruments that were developed, such as samplers, sequencers, drum machines, and synthesizers. From the 1970s to the 2010s, various beat makers and producers have used live instruments, such as drum kit or electronic bass on some tracks. To record the finished beats or beat tracks, beat makers and producers use a variety of sound recording equipment, typically multi-track recorders. Digital audio workstations, also known as DAWs, became more common in the 2010s for producers. Some of the most used DAWs are FL Studio, Ableton Live, and Pro Tools. DAWs have made it possible for more people to be able to make beats in their own home studio without going to a recording studio. Beatmakers who own DAWs do not have to buy all the hardware that a recording studio needed in the 1980s. Huge 72-channel audio consoles, multi-track recorders, racks of rack-mount effects units, because 2010-era DAWs have everything they need to make beats on a good quality, fast laptop computer. Beats are such an integral part of rap music that many producers have been able to make instrumental mixtapes or albums. Even though these instrumentals have no rapping, listeners still enjoy the inventive ways the producer mixes different beats, samples, and instrumental melodies. Examples of these are Ninth Wonder's Tutankhamun and Jay Dilla's Donuts. Some hip-hop records come in 2 versions, a beat with rapping over it and an instrumental with just the beat. The instrumental in this case is provided so that DJs and turntablists can isolate breaks, beats, and other music to create new songs. Language. The development of hip-hop linguistics is complex. Source material include the spirituals of slaves arriving in the New World, Jamaican dub music, the laments of jazz and blues singers, patterned Cockney slang, and radio DJs hyping their audience using rhymes. Hip-hop has a distinctive associated slang. It is also known by alternate names, such as Black English or Ebonics. Academics suggest its development stems from a rejection of the racial hierarchy of language, which held white English as the superior form of educated speech. Due to hip-hop's commercial success in the late 1990s and early 2000s, many of these words have been assimilated into the cultural discourse of several different dialects across America and the world, and even to non-hip-hop fans. The word diss, for example, is particularly prolific. There are also a number of words which predate hip-hop, but are often associated with the culture, with homie being a notable example. Sometimes, terms like "what the dilly yo" are popularized by a single song. In this case, "Put Your Hands Where My Eyes Could See" by Busta Rhymes, and are only used briefly. One particular example is the rule-based slang of Snoop Dogg and E40, who add "izzle" or "is" to the end or middle of words. Hip-hop lyrics have also been known for containing swear words. In particular, the word bitch is seen in countless songs, from NWA's "A Bitch is a Bitch" to Missy Elliott's "She is a Bitch." It is often used in the negative connotation of a woman who is a shallow money grabber. Some female artists have tried to reclaim the word and use it as a term of empowerment. Regardless, the hip-hop community has recently taken an interest in discussing the use of the word bitch and whether it is necessary in rap. Not only the particular words, but also the choice of which language in which rap is widely debated in international hip-hop. In Canada, the use of non-standard variants of French, such as franglais, a mix of French and English, by groups such as Dead Obies or Chiac, such as Radio Radio, has powerful symbolic implications for Canadian language politics and debates on Canadian identity. In the United States, rappers choose to rap in English, Spanish, or Spanglish, depending on their own backgrounds and their intended audience. Social impact. Effects. Hip-hop has made a considerable social impact since its inception in the 1970s. Hip-hop has also become relevant to the field of education because of its implications for understanding language, learning, identity, and curriculum. Orlando Patterson, a sociology professor at Harvard University, helps describe the phenomenon of how hip-hop has spread rapidly around the world. Patterson argues that mass communication is controlled by the wealthy, the government, and major businesses in third-world nations and countries around the world. He also credits mass communication with creating a global cultural hip-hop scene. As a result, the youth are influenced by the American hip-hop scene and start their own forms of hip-hop. Patterson believes that revitalization of hip-hop music will occur around the world as traditional values are mixed with American hip-hop music, and ultimately, a global exchange process will develop that brings youth around the world to listen to a common musical form of hip-hop. It has also been argued that rap music formed as a cultural response to historic oppression and racism, a system for communication among black communities throughout the United States. This is due to the fact that the culture reflected the social, economic, and political realities of the disenfranchised youth. In the 2010s, hip-hop lyrics are starting to reflect original socially conscious themes. Rappers are starting to question the government's power and its oppressive role in some societies. Rap music has been a tool for political, social, and cultural empowerment outside the U.S. Members of minority communities, such as Algerians in France and Turks in Germany, use rap as a platform to protest racism, poverty, and social structures. Linguistics. Hip-hop lyricism has gained a measure of legitimacy in academic and literary circles. Studies of hip-hop linguistics are now offered at institutions such as the University of Toronto, where poet and author George Eliot Clarke has taught the potential power of hip-hop music to promote social change. Greg Thomas of the University of Miami offers courses at both the undergraduate and graduate level, studying the feminist and assertive nature of Lil Kim's lyrics. Some academics, including Ernest Morel and Jeffrey Duncan Andrade, compare hip-hop to the satirical works of great Western canon poets of the modern era, who use imagery and create a mood to criticize society. As quoted in their work promoting academic literacy with urban youth through engaging hip-hop culture, hip-hop texts are rich in imagery and metaphors and can be used to teach irony, tone, diction, and point of view. Hip hop texts can be analyzed for theme, motif, plot, and character development. Both Grandmaster Flash and T.S. Eliot gazed out into their rapidly deteriorating societies and saw a wasteland. Both poets were essentially apocalyptic in nature as they witnessed death, disease, and decay. Censorship. Hip hop music has been censored on radio and TV due to the explicit lyrics of certain genres. Many songs have been criticized for anti establishment and sometimes violent messages. The use of profanity as well as graphic depictions of violence and sex in hip hop music videos and songs makes it hard to broadcast on television stations such as MTV in music video form and on radio. As a result, many hip hop recordings are broadcast in censored form, with offending language bleeped or blanked out of the soundtrack or replaced with clean lyrics. The result, which sometimes renders the remaining lyrics unintelligible or contradictory to the original recording, has become almost as widely identified with the genre as any other aspect of the music, and has been parodied in films such as Austin Powers and Goldmember, in which Mike Myers' character Dr. Evil, performing a parody of a hip-hop music video, Hard Knock Life, Ghetto Anthem by Jay-Z, performs an entire verse that is blanked out. In 1995, Roger Ebert wrote, "Rap has a bad reputation in white circles, where many people believe it consists of obscene and violent anti-white and anti-female guttural. Some of it does, most does not. Most white listeners don't care. They hear black voices in a litany of discontent and tune out. Yet, rap plays the same role today as Bob Dylan did in 1960, giving voice to the hopes and angers of a generation, and a lot of rap is powerful writing." In 1990, Luther Campbell and his group 2 Live Crew filed a lawsuit against Broward County Sheriff Nick Navarro because Navarro wanted to prosecute stores that sold the group's album As Nasty as They Wanna Be because of its obscene and vulgar lyrics. In June 1990, a U.S. District Court judge labeled the album obscene and illegal to sell. However, in 1992, the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit overturned the obscenity ruling from Judge Gonzalez, and the Supreme Court of the United States refused to hear Broward County's appeal. Professor Louis Gates testified on behalf of the 2 Live Crew, arguing that the material that the county alleged was profane actually had important roots in African American vernacular, games, and literary traditions and should be protected. Gangsta rap is a subgenre of hip-hop that reflects the violent culture of inner-city American black youths. The genre was pioneered in the mid-1980s by rappers such as Schoolie D and Ice-T, and was popularized in the latter part of the 1980s by groups such as NWA. Ice-T released 6 in the Mornin', which is often regarded as the first gangsta rap song, in 1986. After the national attention that Ice-T and NWA created in the late 1980s and early 1990s, gangsta rap became the most commercially lucrative subgenre of hip-hop. NWA is the group most frequently associated with the founding of gangsta rap. Their lyrics were more violent, openly confrontational, and shocking than those of established rap acts, featuring incessant profanity and, controversially, use of the N-word. These lyrics were placed over rough, rock guitar-driven beats, contributing to the music's hard-edged feel. The first blockbuster gangsta rap album was NWA's Straight Outta Compton, released in 1988. Straight Outta Compton established West Coast hip-hop as a vital genre, and established Los Angeles as a legitimate rival to hip-hop's longtime capital, New York City. Straight Outta Compton sparked the first major controversy regarding hip-hop lyrics when their song F the Police earned a letter from FBI Assistant Director Milt Ulrich, strongly expressing law enforcement's resentment of the song. Controversy surrounded Ice-T's song Cop Killer from the album Body Count. The song was intended to speak from the viewpoint of a criminal getting revenge on racist, brutal cops. Ice-T's rock song infuriated government officials, the National Rifle Association, and various police advocacy groups. Consequently, Time Warner Music refused to release Ice-T's upcoming album, Home Invasion, because of the controversy surrounding Cop Killer. Ice-T suggested that the furor over the song was an overreaction, telling journalist Chuck Phillips, "They've done movies about nurse killers and teacher killers and student killers. Actor Arnold Schwarzenegger blew away dozens of cops as the Terminator, but I don't hear anybody complaining about that." Ice-T suggested to Phillips that the misunderstanding of Cop Killer and the attempts to censor it had racial overtones. The Supreme Court says it's okay for a white man to burn a cross in public, but nobody wants a black man to write a record about a cop killer. The White House administrations of both George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton criticized the genre. The reason why rap is under attack is because it exposes all the contradictions of American culture. What started out as an underground art form has become a vehicle to expose a lot of critical issues that are not usually discussed in American politics. The problem here is that the White House and wannabes like Bill Clinton represent a political system that never intends to deal with inner-city urban chaos, Sister Souljah told The Times. Until its discontinuation on July 8, 2006, BET ran a late-night segment titled BET Uncut to air nearly uncensored videos. The show was exemplified by music videos such as Tip Drill by Nelly, which was criticized for what many viewed as an exploitative depiction of women, particularly images of a man swiping a credit card between a stripper's buttocks. Public Enemy's Gotta Give the Peeps What They Need was censored on MTV, removing the words Free Mumia. After the attack on the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, Oakland, California group The Coup was under fire for the cover art on their album Party Music, which featured the group's two members holding a guitar tuner and two sticks as the Twin Towers exploded behind them, despite the fact that it was created months before the actual event. The group, having politically radical and Marxist lyrical content, said the cover meant to symbolize the destruction of capitalism. Their record label pulled the album until a new cover could be designed. Product placement and endorsements. Critics such as Business Week's David Kiley argue that the discussion of products within hip-hop culture may actually be the result of undisclosed product placement deals. Such critics allege that shilling or product placement takes place in commercial rap music, and that lyrical references to products are actually paid endorsements. In 2005, a proposed plan by McDonald's to pay rappers to advertise McDonald's products in their music was leaked to the press. After Russell Simmons made a deal with Courvoisier to promote the brand among hip-hop fans, Busta Rhymes recorded the song Pass the Courvoisier. Simmons insists that no money changed hands in the deal. The symbiotic relationship has also stretched to include car manufacturers, clothing designers, and sneaker companies, and many other companies have used the hip-hop community to make their name or to give them credibility. One such beneficiary was Jacob the Jeweler, a diamond merchant from New York. Jacob Arabo's clientele included Sean Combs, Lil Kim, and Nas. He created jewelry pieces from precious metals that were heavily loaded with diamond and gemstones. As his name was mentioned in the song lyrics of his hip-hop customers, his profile quickly rose. Arabo expanded his brand to include gem-encrusted watches that retail for hundreds of thousands of dollars, gaining so much attention that Cartier filed a trademark infringement lawsuit against him for putting diamonds on the faces of their watches and reselling them without permission. Arabo's profile increased steadily until his June 2006 arrest by the FBI on money laundering charges. While some brands welcomed the support of the hip-hop community, one brand that did not was Crystal champagne maker Louis Roederer. A 2006 article from The Economist magazine featured remarks from managing director Frederic Rousseau about whether the brand's identification with rap stars could affect their company negatively. His answer was dismissive. "That's a good question, but what can we do? We can't forbid people from buying it. I'm sure Dom Perignon or Krug Champagne would be delighted to have their business." In retaliation, many hip-hop icons, such as Jay-Z and Sean Combs, who previously included references to Chris, ceased all mentions and purchases of the champagne. 50 Cent's deal with Vitamin Water, Dr. Dre's promotion of his Beats by Dr. Dre headphone line and Dr. Pepper, and Drake's commercial with Sprite are successful deals. Although product placement deals were not popular in the 1980s, MC Hammer was an early innovator in this type of strategy. With merchandise such as dolls, commercials for soft drinks, and numerous television show appearances, Hammer began the trend of rap artists being accepted as mainstream pitch people for brands. Media. Hip-hop culture has had extensive coverage in the media, especially in relation to television. There have been a number of television shows devoted to or about hip-hop, including in Europe HIP HOP in 1984. For many years, BET was the only television channel likely to play hip-hop. But in recent years, the channels VH1 and MTV have added a significant amount of hip hop to their playlist. Run DMC became the first African American group to appear on MTV. With the emergence of the internet, a number of online sites began to offer hip hop related video content. Magazines. Hip hop magazines describe hip hop's culture, including information about rappers and MCs, new hip hop music, concerts, events, fashion, and history. The first hip hop publication, the Hip Hop Hit List, was published in the 1980s. It contained the first rap music record chart. It was put out by two brothers from Newark, New Jersey, Vincent and Charles Carroll, who was also in a hip hop group known as the Nasty Boys. They knew the art form very well and noticed the need for a hip hop magazine. DJs and rappers did not have a way to learn about rap music styles and labels. The periodical began as the first rap record chart and tip sheet for DJs and was distributed through national record pools and record stores throughout the New York City tri-state area. One of the founding publishers, Charles Carroll, noted, "Back then, all DJs came into New York City to buy their records, but most of them did not know what was hot enough to spend money on, so we charted it." Jay Burnett became Vincent Carroll's partner and played an instrumental role in its later development. Another popular hip-hop magazine that arose in the 1980s was Word Up magazine, an American magazine catering to the youth with an emphasis on hip-hop. It featured articles on what it is like to be a part of the hip-hop community, promoted upcoming albums, bringing awareness to the projects that the artist was involved in, and also included posters of trending celebrities within the world of hip-hop. The magazine was published monthly and mainly concerning rap, hip-hop, and R&B music. Word Up magazine was highly popular. It was even mentioned in the popular song by the Notorious B.I.G., "Juicy, It Was All a Dream," used to read Word Up magazine. Word Up magazine was a part of pop culture. New York tourists from abroad took the publication back home with them to other countries to share it, creating a worldwide interest in the culture and new art form. It had a printed distribution of 50,000, a circulation rate of 200,000 with well over 25,000 subscribers. The Hip Hop Hit List was also the first to define hip hop as a culture introducing the many aspects of the art form, such as fashion, music, dance, the arts, and most importantly, the language. For instance, on the cover, the headliner included the tag, "All literature was produced to meet street comprehension," which proved their loyalty not only to the culture, but also to the streets. Most interviews were written verbatim, which included their innovative broken English style of writing. Some of the early charts were written in the graffiti format tag style, but was made legible enough for the masses. The Carroll brothers were also consultants to the many record companies who had no idea how to market hip-hop music. Vincent Carroll, the magazine's creator-publisher, went on to become a huge source for marketing and promoting the culture of hip-hop, starting Blow Up Media, the first hip-hop marketing firm with offices in New York City's Tribeca district. At the age of 21, Vincent Carroll employed a staff of 15 and assisted in launching some of the culture's biggest and brightest stars, the Fugees, Nelly, the Outzadas featuring Eminem, and many more. Later, other publications spawned up including Hip Hop Connection, XXL, Scratch, The Source, and Vibe. Many individual cities have also produced their own local hip-hop newsletters, while hip-hop magazines with national distribution are found in a few other countries. The 21st century also ushered in the rise of online media, and hip-hop fan sites now offer comprehensive hip-hop coverage on a daily basis. Fashion. Clothing, hair, and other styles have been a big part of hip-hop's social and cultural impact since the 1970s. Although the styles have changed over the decades, distinctive urban apparel and looks have been an important way for rappers, breakdancers, and other hip-hop community members to express themselves. As the hip-hop music genre's popularity increased, so did the effect of its fashion. While there were early items synonymous with hip-hop that crossed over into the mainstream culture, like Run DMC's affinity for Adidas or the Wu-Tang Clan's championing of Clark's Wallabies, it wasn't until its commercial peak that hip-hop fashion became influential. Starting in the mid to late 1990s, hip-hop culture embraced some major designers and established a new connection with classic fashion. Brands such as Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, and Tommy Hilfiger all tapped into hip-hop culture and gave very little in return. Moving into the new millennium, hip-hop fashion consisted of baggy shirts, jeans, and jerseys. As names like Pharrell and Jay-Z started their own clothing lines and still others like Kanye West linked up with designers like Louis Vuitton, the clothes got tighter, more classically fashionable, and expensive. As hip hop has seen a shift in the means by which its artists express their masculinity, from violence and intimidation to wealth flaunting and entrepreneurship, it has also seen the emergence of rapper branding. The modern day hip hop artist is no longer limited to music serving as their sole occupation or source of income. By the early 1990s, major apparel companies had realized the economic potential of tapping into hip hop culture. Tommy Hilfiger was one of the first major fashion designers who actively courted rappers as a way of promoting his streetwear. By joining forces, the artist and the corporation are able to jointly benefit from each other's resources. Hip-hop artists are trendsetters and tastemakers. Their fans range from minority groups who can relate to their professed struggles to majority groups who cannot truly relate but like to consume the fantasy of living a more masculine life. The rappers provide the cool, hip factor, while the corporations deliver the product, advertising, and financial assets. Tommy Hilfiger, one of the first mainstream designers to actively court rappers as a way of promoting his streetwear, serves a prototypical example of the hip-hop fashion collaborations. In exchange for giving artists free wardrobes, Hilfiger found its name mentioned in both rhyming verses of rap songs and their shout-out lyrics, in which rap artists chant out thanks to friends and sponsors for their support. Hilfiger's success convinced other large mainstream American fashion design companies like Ralph Lauren and Calvin Klein to tailor lines to the lucrative market of hip-hop artists and fans. Artists now use brands as a means of supplemental income to their music or are creating and expanding their own brands that become their primary source of income. As Harry Elam explains, there has been a movement from the incorporation and redefinition of existing trends to actually designing and marketing products as hip-hop fashion. Diversification. Hip-hop music has spawned dozens of subgenres, which incorporate hip-hop music production approaches such as sampling, creating beats, or rapping. The diversification process stems from the appropriation of hip-hop culture by other ethnic groups. There are many varying social influences that affect hip-hop's message in different nations. It is frequently used as a musical response to perceived political and/or social injustices. In South Africa, the largest form of hip-hop is called Kwaito, which has had a growth similar to American hip-hop. Kwaito is a direct reflection of a post-apartheid South Africa and is a voice for the voiceless, a term that U.S. hip-hop is often referred to. Kwaito is even perceived as a lifestyle, encompassing many aspects of life, including language and fashion. Kwaito is a political and party-driven genre, as performers use the music to express their political views and also to express their desire to have a good time. Kwaito is a music that came from a once hated and oppressed people, but it is now sweeping the nation. The main consumers of Kwaito are adolescents, and half of the South African population is under 21. Some of the large Kwaito artists have sold more than 100,000 albums, and in an industry where 25,000 albums sold is considered a gold record, those are impressive numbers. Kwaito allows the participation and creative engagement of otherwise socially excluded peoples in the generation of popular media. South African hip-hop has made an impact worldwide, with performers such as Tumi, Hip Hop Pantsula, Tux, and Gaga. In Jamaica, the sounds of hip-hop are derived from American and Jamaican influences. Jamaican hip-hop is defined both through dancehall and reggae music. Jamaican Kool Herc brought the sound systems, technology, and techniques of reggae music to New York during the 1970s. Jamaican hip-hop artists often rap in both Brooklyn and Jamaican accents. Jamaican hip-hop subject matter is often influenced by outside and internal forces. Outside forces such as the bling-bling era of today's modern hip-hop and internal influences coming from the use of anti-colonialism and marijuana or ganja references, which Rastafarians believe bring them closer to God. Author Wayne Marshall argues that hip-hop, as with any number of African-American cultural forms before it, offers a range of compelling and contradictory significations to Jamaican artists and audiences. From modern blackness to foreign mind, transnational cosmopolitanism to militant Pan-Africanism, radical remixology to outright mimicry, hip-hop in Jamaica embodies the myriad ways that Jamaicans embrace, reject, and incorporate foreign yet familiar forms. In the developing world, hip-hop has made a considerable impact in the social context. Despite the lack of resources, hip hop has made considerable inroads. Due to limited funds, hip hop artists are forced to use very basic tools, and even graffiti, an important aspect of the hip hop culture, is constrained due to its unavailability to the average person. Hip hop has begun making inroads with more than black artists. There are a number of other minority artists who are taking center stage as many first generation minority children come of age. One example is rapper Aquafina, an Asian American who raps about being Asian as well as being female. She, like many others, used rap to express her experiences as a minority, not necessarily to unite minorities together, but to tell her story. Many hip hop artists from the developing world come to the United States to seek opportunities. Maya Arul Pragasam, aka MIA, a Sri Lanka born Tamil hip hop artist, claims, "I'm just trying to build some sort of bridge. I'm trying to create a third place, somewhere in between the developed world and the developing world." Another music artist using hip hop to provide a positive message to young Africans is Emmanuel Jal, a former child soldier from South Sudan. Jal is one of the few South Sudanese music artists to have broken through on an international level with his unique form of hip hop and a positive message in his lyrics. Jal has attracted the attention of mainstream media and academics with his story and use of hip hop as a healing medium for war afflicted people in Africa, and he has also been sought out on the international lecture fora such as TED. Many K-pop artists in South Korea have been influenced by hip-hop, and many South Korean artists perform hip-hop music. In Seoul, South Korea, Koreans b-boy. Education. Scholars argue that hip-hop can have an empowering effect on youth. While there is misogyny, violence, and drug use in rap music videos and lyrics, hip-hop also displays many positive themes of self-reliance, resilience, and self-esteem. These messages can be inspiring for a youth living in poverty. A lot of rap songs contain references to strengthening the African American community, promoting social causes. Social workers have used hip hop to build a relationship with at risk youth and develop a deeper connection with the child. Hip hop has the potential to be taught as a way of helping people see the world more critically, be it through forms of writing, creating music, or social activism. The lyrics of hip hop have been used to learn about literary devices, such as metaphor, imagery, irony, tone, theme, motif, plot, and point of view. Organizations and facilities are providing spaces and programs for communities to explore making and learning about hip hop. An example is the IMP Labs in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. Many dance studios and colleges now offer lessons in hip hop alongside tap and ballet, as well as KRS-One teaching hip-hop lectures at Harvard University. Hip-hop producer Ninth Wonder and former rapper-actor Christopher Play Martin from hip-hop group Kid 'n Play have taught hip-hop history classes at North Carolina Central University, and Ninth Wonder has also taught a hip-hop sampling soul class at Duke University. In 2007, the Cornell University Library established a hip-hop collection to collect and make accessible the historical artifacts of hip-hop culture and to ensure their preservation for future generations. The hip-hop community has been a major factor in educating its listeners on HIV/AIDS, a disease that has affected the community very closely. One of the biggest artists of early hip-hop, Eazy-E, a member of NWA, had died of AIDS in 1995. Since then, many artists, producers, choreographers, and many others from many different locations have tried to make an impact and raise awareness of HIV in the hip-hop community. Many artists have made songs as sort of PSAs to raise awareness of HIV for hip-hop listeners. Some songs that raise awareness are Salt and Peppa, Let's Talk About AIDS, Coolio, Too Hot, and more. Tanzanian artists such as Professor J and the group Afande Sele are notable for their contributions to this genre of hip-hop music and the awareness they have spread for HIV. American writer, activist, and hip-hop artist Timum T. West, who was diagnosed with AIDS in 1999, formed queer hip-hop group Deep Dick Collective, who got together to rap about the HIV pandemic among queer black men and LGBTQ activism in hip-hop. A nonprofit organization out of New York City called Hip Hop for Life strives to educate the youth, especially the low-income youth, about social and political problems in their areas of interest, which includes hip-hop. Hip Hop for Life has held many events around the New York City area to raise awareness for HIV and other problems surrounding these low-income children and their communities. Values and philosophy. Essentialism. Since the age of slavery, music has long been the language of African American identity. Because reading and writing were forbidden under the auspices of slavery, music became the only accessible form of communication. Hundreds of years later, in inner city neighborhoods plagued by high illiteracy and dropout rates, music remains the most dependable medium of expression. Hip hop is thus to modern day as Negro spirituals are to the plantations of the Old South. The emergent music articulates the terrors of one's environment better than written or spoken word, thereby forging an unquestioned association of oppression with creativity that is endemic to African American culture. As a result, lyrics of rap songs have often been treated as confessions to a number of violent crimes in the United States. It is also considered to be the duty of rappers and other hip hop artists, DJs, dancers, to represent their city and neighborhood. This demands being proud of being from disadvantaged cities' neighborhoods that have traditionally been a source of shame and glorifying them in lyrics and graffiti. This has potentially been one of the ways that hip hop has become regarded as a local rather than foreign genre of music in so many countries around the world in just a few decades. Nevertheless, sampling and borrowing from a number of genres and places is also a part of the hip hop milieu, and an album like the surprise hit Kala by Anglo-Tamil rapper MIA was recorded in locations all across the world and features sounds from a different country on every track. According to scholar Joseph Schloss, the essentialist perspective of hip-hop conspicuously obfuscates the role that individual style and pleasure plays in the development of the genre. Schloss notes that hip-hop is forever fossilized as an inevitable cultural emergent, as if none of hip-hop's innovators had been born. A different group of poor black youth from the Bronx would have developed hip-hop in exactly the same way. However, while the pervasive oppressive conditions of the Bronx were likely to produce another group of disadvantaged youth, he questions whether they would be equally interested, nonetheless willing to put in as much time and energy into making music as Grandmaster Flash, DJ Kool Herc, and Afrika Bambaataa. He thus concludes that hip-hop was a result of choice, not fate, and that when individual contributions and artistic preferences are ignored, the genre's origin becomes overly attributed to collective cultural oppression. Authenticity. Hip-hop music artists and advocates have stated that hip-hop has been an authentic, true, and real African American artistic and cultural form since its emergence in inner-city Bronx neighborhoods in the 1970s. Some music critics, scholars, and political commentators have denied hip-hop's authenticity. Advocates who claim hip-hop is an authentic music genre state that it is an ongoing response to the violence and discrimination experienced by black people in the United States, from the slavery that existed into the 19th century to the lynchings of the 20th century and the ongoing racial discrimination faced by blacks. Paul Gilroy and Alexander Wihilye state that, unlike disco, jazz, R&B, house music, and other genres that were developed in the African American community and which were quickly adopted and then increasingly controlled by white music industry executives, hip-hop has remained largely controlled by African American artists, producers, and executives. In his book, Phonographies, Wihilye describes the political and cultural affiliations that hip-hop music enables. In contrast, Greg Tate states that the market-driven, commodity form of commercial hip-hop has uprooted the genre from the celebration of African American culture and the messages of protest that predominated in its early forms. Tate states that the commodification and commercialization of hip-hop culture undermines the dynamism of the genre for African American communities. These two dissenting understandings of hip-hop's scope and influence frame debates that revolve around hip-hop's possession of, or lack of, authenticity. Anticipating the market arguments of Tate and others, both Gilroy and Wihilye assert that hip-hop has always had a different function than Western popular music as a whole, a function that exceeds the constraints of market capitalism. Wihilye notes, popular music, generally in the form of recordings, has and still continues to function as one of the main channels of communication between the different geographical and cultural points in the African diaspora, allowing artists to articulate and perform their diasporic citizenship to international audiences and establish conversations with other diasporic communities. For Paul Gilroy, hip hop proves an outlet of articulation and a sonic space in which African Americans can exert control and influence that they often lack in other socio-political and economic domains. In Phonographies, Wihelye explains how new sound technologies used in hip hop encourage diasporic citizenship and African American cultural and political activities. Gilroy states that the power of hip hop music lies in developing black struggles by communicating information, organizing consciousness, and testing out or deploying individual or collective forms of African American cultural and political actions. In the third chapter of The Black Atlantic, Jewels Brought from Bondage, Black Music and the Politics of Authenticity, Gilroy asserts that these elements influence the production of and the interpretation of black cultural activities. What Gilroy calls the Black Atlantic music's rituals and traditions are a more expansive way of thinking about African American blackness, a way that moves beyond contemporary debates around essentialist and anti-essentialist arguments. As such, Gilroy states that music has been and remains a central staging ground for debates over the work, responsibility, and future role of black cultural and artistic production. Traditional versus progressive views. Old school hip hop performer DJ Kool Herc, along with traditional hip hop artists Afrika Bambaataa and Grandmaster Caz, originally held views against mainstream rap. However, recent interviews indicate they have changed their ways to a certain extent. However, rappers like KRS-One still feel a strong disapproval of the rap industry, especially through mainstream media. In b-boying, most supporters have begun to slowly involve more industry sponsorship through events on the World B-Boy Series and through the UDEF powered by Silverback Open. Other b-boys have begun to accept using the term breakdance, but only if the term b-boying is too difficult to communicate to the general public. Regardless of such, b-boys and b-girls still exist to showing lack of support to jams and events that they feel represent the culture as a sport, form of entertainment, and as well through capitalism. Battle rap as an industry has also been strongly supported by old school or golden era legends such as Herc, Kid Capri, and KRS-One. Reception, commercialization, and stereotyping. In 2012, hip-hop and rap pioneer Chuck D from the group Public Enemy criticized young hip-hop artists from the 2010s, stating that they have taken a music genre with extensive roots in underground music and turned it into commercialized pop music. In particular, seminal figures in the early underground, politically motivated music, such as Ice-T, have criticized current hip-hop artists for being more concerned with image than substance. Critics have stated that 2010s hip-hop artists are contributing to cultural stereotyping of African American culture and are poseur gangsters. Critics have also stated that hip-hop music promotes drug use and violence. Hip-hop has been criticized by rock-centric critics who state that hip-hop is not a true art form, and who state that rock and roll music is more authentic. These critics are advocating a viewpoint called rockism, which favors music written and performed by the individual artist, as seen in some famous singer-songwriter-led rock bands, and is against 2000s decade-era hip-hop, which these critics argue give too large a role to record producers and digital sound recording. Hip-hop is seen as being too violent and explicit in comparison with rock. Some contend that the criticisms have racial overtones, as these critics deny that hip-hop is an art form and praising rock genres that prominently feature white males. Marginalization of women. The hip-hop music genre and its subculture has been criticized for its gender bias and its negative impacts on women in African American culture. Gangsta rap artists such as Eazy-E, Snoop Dogg, and Dr. Dre have, primarily in the 90s, rapped lyrics that portray women as sex toys and inferior to or otherwise dependent upon men. Between 1987 and 1993, over 400 hip-hop songs had lyrics that described violence toward women, including rape, assault, and murder. These anti-women lyrics have led some male listeners to make physical threats toward women, and they have created negative stereotypes of young urban African American women. Hip-hop music frequently promotes masculine hegemony, and it depicts women as individuals who must rely on men. The portrayal of women in hip-hop lyrics and videos tends to be violent, degrading, and highly sexualized. There is a high frequency of songs with lyrics that are demeaning, or depict sexual violence or sexual assault towards women. Videos often portray idealized female bodies and depict women as being the object of male pleasure. The misrepresentation of women, primarily women of color, as objects rather than other human beings, and the presence of male dominance in hip hop extends back to the birth of the genre. However, many female artists have also emerged in shedding light on both their personal issues and the misrepresentations of women in hip hop and culture. These artists include, but are not limited to, Queen Latifah, TLC, and MC Lyte. Despite the success of them and others, female rappers remain proportionally few in the mainstream industry. Very few female artists have been recognized in hip hop, and the most popular, successful, and influential artists, record producers, and music executives are males. Women who are in rap groups, such as Lauryn Hill of the Fugees, tend to have less advantages and opportunities than male artists. Female artists have received significantly less recognition in hip hop. Only one female artist has won Best Rap Album of the Year at the Grammy Awards since the category was added in 1995. In addition, African American female hip hop artists have been recognized even less in the industry. Salt and Peppa felt when they were establishing themselves as a successful group, they had to prove doubters wrong, stating that being women in hip hop at a time when it wasn't that many women, we felt like we had more to prove. Marginalization of Latinas. Latinas, especially Cuban, Dominican, and Puerto Rican women, are degraded and fetishized in hip hop. White women and Asian women are also fetishized in hip hop, but not as much as Latinas, who are referred to as Spanish. Latinas, especially Puerto Rican models and Dominican models, are often portrayed as an object of sexual desire in hip hop videos. Homophobia and transphobia. As well, the hip hop music community has been criticized with accusations of homophobia and transphobia. Hip hop song lyrics contain offensive, homophobic slurs, and sometimes violent threats towards queer people, such as rapper DMX's Where the Hood At, rapper Eazy-E's Nobody Move, rap group Brand Nubian's Punks Jump Up to Get Beat Down. Many rappers and hip hop artists have advocated homophobia and/or transphobia. These artists include Ja Rule, who in an interview claimed, "We need to go step to MTV and Viacom, and let's talk about all these effing shows that they have on MTV that is promoting homosexuality, that my kids can't watch this ish." And rap artist Eric Sermon, who has said publicly, hip-hop will never accept transgender rappers. Until the 2010s, hip-hop music has excluded the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, or LGBT, community. This has perpetuated a culture in hip-hop that is prejudiced towards queer and trans people, making it a tough culture for queer artists to participate in. Despite this prejudice, some queer or genderqueer rappers and hip-hop artists have become successful and popular in the 2010s. One of the more notable members of the LGBT community in hip-hop is Frank Ocean, who came out in 2012 and has released critically acclaimed albums and won 2 Grammy Awards. Other successful queer hip-hop rap artists include female bisexual rapper Azealia Banks, pansexual androgynous rapper and singer Angel Hayes, lesbian rapper Sia, gay rapper singer Kevin Abstract, and genderqueer rapper Mickey Blanco. Legacy. Having its roots in reggae, disco, funk, and soul music, hip-hop has since expanded worldwide. Its expansion includes events like Afrika Bambaata's 1982 releasing of Planet Rock, which tried to establish a more global harmony. In the 1980s, the British Slick Rick became the first international hit hip-hop artist not native to America. From the 1980s onward, television made hip-hop global. From Yo! MTV Raps to Public Enemy's World Tour, hip-hop spread to Latin America and became a mainstream culture. Hip-hop has been cut, mixed, and adapted as the music spreads to new areas. Early hip-hop may have reduced inner-city gang violence by providing an alternative means of expression to physical violence. However, with the emergence of commercial and crime-related gangster rap during the early 1990s, violence, drugs, weapons, and misogyny were key themes. Socially and politically conscious hip-hop has long been disregarded by mainstream America in favor of its media-baiting sibling, gangster rap. Black female artists, such as Queen Latifah, Missy Elliott, and MC Lyte, have made great strides since the hip-hop industry first began. By producing music and an image that did not cater to the hypersexualized stereotypes of black women in hip-hop, these women pioneered a revitalized and empowering image of black women in hip-hop. Though many hip-hop artists have embraced the ideals that effectively disenfranchise black female artists, many others choose to employ forms of resistance that counteract these negative portrayals of women in hip hop and offer a different narrative. These artists seek to expand ways of traditional thinking through different ways of cultural expression. In this effort, they hope to elicit a response to female hip hop artists not with a misogynist lens, but with one that validates women's struggle. For women, artists such as Missy Elliott, Lil Kim, Young M.A., and others are providing mentorship for new female MCs. In addition, there is a vibrant scene outside the mainstream that provides an opportunity for women and their music to flourish.